Hey everybody, this is Greg Petix, founder, curator, docent, and gift shop employee of the Petixonian Institute of Comic Book Studies. Today we're going to be looking at Wulf the Barbarian number 1 through 4, published by Atlas Comics from 1974 to 1975. It only lasted 4 issues, so that's all there is of Wulf the Barbarian. As we can see, very striking cover. No captions, no dialogue. A lot of comics in the 70s would do that, muddle up the graphics with stupid blurbs and stuff. But this is just a nice, striking image, like something you'd see on a paperback cover or something. Penciled by Larry Hama, and almost more importantly, inked by Klaus Janson. Klaus Janson is an interesting character in comics history. He, back in the 70s, he was the most amazing inker out there. You could hand him the worst pencils and he would embellish it with so much of his own illustration and amazing shading and tones that it would transform it into a much better piece of art. It was kind of heavy-handed. It would kind of cover up the artist, but it was kind of a good thing because Klaus Janson was a better drawer than most of those artists working for Marvel. But here he is, inking over Larry Hama. Larry Hama was a pretty damn good artist back then. But with Klaus Janson's inks, this becomes really good. This is like Neil Adams worthy stuff here. I love the logo still. This comic was one of my favorite comics as a kid. I still love it. I got it when I was about 9 or 10 out of a quarter box, and it was part of that post-Conan Barbarian boom. In the early to mid-70s, a lot of comic publishers were putting out their own Conan knockoffs, trying to have the same success. Not many of them did, of course. But it was interesting to me as a kid, though. This was the only barbarian in that whole horde of clones. He had blonde hair. That kind of stands out. All the other barbarians were brunettes for some reason. To be like Conan, I guess. But let's crack this shit open. And I wasn't even a big fan of barbarian comics as a kid, but I love this one because it goes beyond just being a barbarian comic. It's actually really good fantasy. It's a good fantasy comic. So here we go, first page. So this is the creation. Wulf the Barbarian is the creation of Larry Hama. He writes and pencils this issue. And Larry Hama is an interesting character in comics. As a youth, he studied judo and Japanese archery and swordsmanship. As a young man, he got drafted and went off to fight in Vietnam. Saw some real combat. He was in the shit, as they used to say. And then when he got back, he was an actor. And there's old episodes of Saturday Night Live and MASH where you can see him in little bit parts in the background. He's there. But after a year of that, he decided that he wanted to be a comic artist. And he worked as an assistant for Hollywood and worked with Neil Adams Continuity Associates studio. But then he started getting work for Marvel in 1974 and drew some Iron Fists. And then he, when Atlas Comics started around that time, he jumped ship because they let him create his own character and have his own title that he could write and draw. So after Atlas folded, after about a year, they didn't last long, he went over to DC to become an editor. But then during the DC implosion, he got laid off like a lot of guys. And he went over to Marvel to become an editor. And that's where he was the mastermind behind those G.I. Joe comics in the 80s that are so beloved by people half a generation younger than me. I was a little too old for those, I guess. I didn't really dig them. But another accomplishment he did that a lot of people don't know about is my friend James D. Giovanna. He was an assistant editor at Marvel in the late 80s, and he was good friends with Larry. And he told me this story, and Larry told James that in the 70s, when he was at Marvel, he basically confronted some of the editors and said, what's up with this thing in comics where every Asian character is colored like bright yellow. Like, see this yellow here? You know, when I was a kid, and even in the, you know, all through the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, any Asian character, they were this bright yellow, which was totally unrealistic. It didn't look like any human being's skin color ever, unless they had severe jaundice, I imagine. But these editors were like, I don't know why. And he's like, look at my skin. You know, Larry Hama's Japanese. He's like, do I look like that? No, nobody does. And they were like, I guess you're right. So after that, they stopped coloring all Asians bright yellow and gave them a normal skin tone. So that's kind of a great accomplishment in comics history, I think. But this is another great accomplishment, at least to me, because when I was a little kid, man, I must have reread this comic like every week growing up. I just hoped and prayed there'd be more issues, and I would imagine where Wulf would have gone after these few issues. So, getting back to the credit box, inked by Klaus Janson. Letterer Kathy Ann Thomas, I've never heard of her again since Atlas folded. And editor Jeff Rovin, who, he was the good editor at Atlas. All the good stuff that came out of Atlas was usually under his guidance. So we start off the story. We're in the city of Azerbaiyah. It's in this world, it's kind of like the analog of the Middle East, it looks like. And Wulf is on his way to meet his mentor and kind of father figure, Stavro Darkoven, who's juggling daggers in the marketplace for spare change. That's what him and Wulf do. They're pretty poor. So when he's about to meet up with Stavro, there's this asshole rich bailiff dude who taunts him about being poor. Basically, he's mocking him. It sounds like his whole life he's had to hear from this asshole. He ignores him and sees Stavro, and he helps him back to their little hovel where they live, because Stavro has a bum leg. He needs a crutch. He's in a lot of pain every day. So Stavro says, hey, before we do our sword practice tonight, get me a jug of wine from the wine merchant. So Wulf goes off to do that. And here we see a little foreshadowing. It's very subtle because Larry Hama has drawn all these background figures, populated the streets with all these random characters. So at first you just think, oh yeah, here's some more background characters, like this little kid. But you can tell, though, there's some intent there. But you almost might miss it if you're reading this comic quickly. He goes to the wine merchant, and while he's waiting, he looks over and he sees this little kid with a golden falcon. And it triggers a memory in his brain of another golden falcon long ago. And we go to a flashback, and we see the golden falcon of his youth flying through the sky. Young Prince Wulf is on a hunting expedition with his parents, Lord Wulfgar, the Thane of Barenholm, and the Lady Lenore, who's the queen. And Barenholm seems to be, as you can tell by his helmet, kind of, the analog of like Norway in our world. It's like a Viking-like culture, it looks like. It's in the Northlands of this world. Also along for the ride is Stavro. And this is, before he was a beggar, he was the fencing master of the House of Wulfgar. And kind of like the general of the army. And it's a nice day, everyone's having a good time. And then all of a sudden this arrow comes out of nowhere and kills the golden falcon. And we see who did it. It's the trolls of Drakenroost. They're the minions of this wizard bastard named Mordek Malmoriak. You can see his face on all their chests. All of his minions have these little telescreens so he can keep an eye on what they're doing. And this is like a small army of trolls. Like, they're in some serious shit right now. Lord Wulfgar wastes no time, instantly jumps into the fray. I love this panel here where the horse is rearing back like that and Wulfgar's leaning into the battle. It's some good stuff. Larry Hama is a really good designer and storyteller. Even though he fights valiantly, He gets an arrow to the chest, kills him. Stavro takes command of the army, commands the men to make a shield wall around the dying king and his mourning wife and young Wulf. Lenore orders Stavro to take young Wulf away from the battle. He's not old enough, he's not of age, so he cannot wield the sword of vengeance in the name of the House of Wulfgar until he's of age. So she wants him to take him to safety where he can grow up and then hopefully redeem the situation. To Wulf's chagrin and sorrow, his mother won't come with him. She's an honorable queen, and she says, I can't ask these men to fight and die for us and, abandon them. So Stavro takes young Wulf, puts him on a horse, and they break through the ranks. This is another great panel, the way the horse is rearing up on his back legs, and Stavro's looking all badass. And I forgot to mention actually, that the colorist is not credited in this comic, unfortunately, because there's a lot of interesting color, especially back in the mid-70s when they had this newsprint paper. The printing wasn't as good. But they're trying to do interesting things, like trying to do a sunset with the limited palette of the printing at the time. And even some of the colors that are just nice and deep, this color seemed to have an affinity for doing really good greens. There's lots of good green in here, deep blues. It's pretty good stuff. I wish I knew who it was. So they fight their way through the trolls, and Wulf looks back for one last glimpse of his mother, and she's bravely going to take on the trolls. And, she's not a swords woman. She's not a warrior or soldier. She can barely lift the sword. We can see it's shaking in her hand. And this troll just conks her on the head with his cudgel, brains her. And he turns around and locks eyes with Wulf, this leering grin. And this sears itself into Wulf's brain, as you can imagine, the troll that killed his mother. So here we have this amazing panel here. Look at that. It's so Gil Kane there. The way the horse is at a 90-degree angle because he's running so fast and taking a turn. So even though they've passed the main host of the army, this dragon with a rider on it, another minion of Mordek, attacks them. And here we can see in better detail the telescreen. Once again, Klaus Jansson's great inking. He can give that effect of it being like a glass, surface. So Stavro stabs the dragon and jumps on its back, stabs the guy right in his chest, his telescreen chest. And then they hijack the dragon. Him and young Wulf jump on and take it so they can escape. Now we finally get to see Mordek in the flesh. His viewing orb is shattered, I assume because Stavro stabbed that guy in the chest. It seemed like as a kid, I was like, that seems pretty stupid. I mean, every time one of his minions gets killed, he has to replace his orb. It seems like an expensive proposition or just a pain in the ass. But Mordek is pretty content that he finally, after all these years, killed the royal couple. But his little toady-like guy, second in command, Gerba, is like, but master, what about young Prince Wulf? I think he's drawn so funny. He's kind of cute in a weird, ugly way, like a pug. But Mordek's not concerned. He's got 10 years to kill him, and now he's the master of Castle Silverkeep, the main center of Bernholm. So here we see an example of Larry Hama's world building that he was engaging in. He didn't just want to make a dumb barbarian comic. This is like some good fantasy world building going on. He could have just drawn a panel of the dragon flying over some nondescript land, but he doesn't. He uses this dragon flight to show us all these exotic locales in this world. So he's flying over the mountains of madness and past the floating cities of the sky pirates. These guys have these like dirigible ships in the sky. That's their cities. Above the gathered hosts of the lizard kings. I think I see Jim Morrison in there somewhere. And through the dizzying spires of the valley of screaming demons. So all of these places, you know, when I reread this comic as a kid, I was like, oh, I wish that comic exists. Look, I want to see Wulf take on the Sky Pirates and the Lizard Kings, but we never did because the comic didn't last that long. Once again, some great coloring. I love the bluish hue of the Lizard Kings and the deep red of the Screaming Demons. Even the green of the dragon. Like I said, this colorist really did good greens. So finally, in the desert of Kesh, the dragon dies of its wounds and exhaustion. And it throws the two from its back. And in that crash landing, Stavro, that's where he hurts his leg. Forever. So they limp into the city of, that is, Azurbaia, that we saw earlier. So this is how they got there. So with his last gold coin, Stavro buys a set of daggers. Because even though they're hungry, he knows one meal's not going to do it. Instead of buying a meal, he buys a means to get meals. So, you know, he's too honorable. He could become a thief and with his fighting skills would do quite well. But, you know, he's an honorable guy. So they become beggars, street performers. Every day they juggle daggers in the street, and young Wulf holds the begging bowl. And, you know, they just eat watery gruel and live in this hovel. But every night, young Wulf gets a master class in the fighting arts from Stavro. It's not a very good childhood. Stavro was really harsh on him. I mean, he's this little kid, and, you know, Stavro's clonking him on the head and berating him and yelling at him. He's really training him hard. And because, you know, he's got a reason, though. He wants him to be ready to take down Mordek in a few years. Here he is, just enviously looking at all the other kids who get to play. But, you know, Wulf doesn't get to play. All he gets to do is beg all day and practice swordsmanship all night. Also, Stavro over the years becomes more of a drinker. The pain gets worse in his legs, so he seeks the solace that lay at the bottom of a wine jug more and more. Also, every night, young Wulf has these nightmares and visions of that troll that killed his mother, who he is actually nicknamed the Grinner. And he's kind of haunted by his face. So now we flash forward back to the present. This little kid runs up to Wulf and says, "Hey, there's trouble at your place. I saw 3 swordsmen, creep into your place." So he runs there as fast as he can. He finds Stavro dead. But Stavro took 2 of the guys with them, and the 3rd he wounded, because we see this trail of blood. Wulf gets his gear on and follows the trail of blood into an alley. And who should it be? It's the Grinner. And the Grinner is like, he's an asshole. He's totally taunting. You know, Wulf, he's like, "I'm going to cleave your skull like I killed your mom." So angrily, Wulf charges at him. As soon as they clash swords, though, Wulf's sword totally breaks in 2. And we realize that the Grinner, all this time, has held on to the sword of Wulfgarth that he took off of Wulf's mother's body after he killed her. It's not like a magic sword or anything, but it's just the best blade of this time. Many blades can stand up against it. So he continues to taunt him. He's playing a little game by throwing the sword, catching it in between his hands, and saying, "Guess which hand shall strike the blow that kills you." But Wulf, all he can see in his brain, I kind of like the sequence, is he just sees the wraith-like form of a juggler, Stavro. And he remembers 3 other blades. But this is just one. And for a guy who grew up juggling daggers, it's pretty easy pickings for him to grab the sword out of his hand and thrust it into Grinner's chest and gets his vengeance. And it's so satisfying, this vengeance that he's waited for so long, that he actually yells out, "Vengeance!" So I think he's feeling, that's pretty satisfying vengeance. So then the rich bailiff shows up and basically says, for years you've just been a nuisance, but now you're full-on scofflaw, so I'm taking you into prison. And Wulf is basically like, fuck you, knocks him off his horse, takes his cloak, and rides out of the city on his quest, his mission to kill Mordek and regain the throne. So that's the first issue. Oh, man. I mean, just imagine being a 9-year-old kid reading that. I didn't even like Barbarian comics that much as a kid, but I love this one. And I hope you can see why from that issue. So let's get to the second issue. So Wulf the Barbarian number 2, we can already see there's some meddling going on at Atlas Comics. A lot of the editors there were nincompoops. So if you just look at this, it should be pretty good, Hama-Jansen collaboration. Nice, striking image. But for some reason, Larry Lieber, the editor-in-chief of Atlas, thought that it needed something else. So this crudely, obviously thrown in piece of art, it looks like he literally just cut a circle out of the artwork. And there's actually an example. This is a comic book artist, number 16. If you want to know about Atlas Comics, find this issue. It is amazing. But he interviews Larry Hama, and they actually have a photostat, if I can zoom in for you. That's what the original cover looked like without the meddling. It's fine on its own. But they did this stupid thing here. I think that Larry Lieber drew it. Obviously different art, obviously inferior art. This is terrible. And it's so badly drawn that other than the arm, you can't even tell what's going on with her body, this witch lady. It's like an amorphous blob. It's just wretched. And she's not even in the comic. There's no witch lady in this comic. It was just complete idiocy that they did that. But still, the insides are some good stuff. So it starts off very cinematically. We see these vultures. And then we kind of pan down. We see what they're feeding on. And then we zoom in a little more. And we see these 8 dead guys in the desert, like kind of warrior guys. But they're, they're bandits. And in the background, we see Wulf fighting the 9th one. And then we zoom in and we full on see them confronting each other. Wulf has obviously dispatched the 8 other guys who accosted him in the desert. And but this guy, Wulf, is thinking to himself, because of his, great training, he can tell by his moves that this guy knows his shit. He's a master swordsman, so this is going to be tough. A lot harder than those first 8 guys. So they size each other up, run at each other, and Wulf's got the better training, though, from Stavro, so he wins. So here we got the credits again. We got script and pencils, once again by Larry Hama, inks by Klaus Janson, lettering by Kathy and Thomas. Here's an interesting thing here. Special thanks to Neil Adams, Ralph Reese, Ed Davis, Wally Wood, Bob McLeod, Pat Broderick, Vincente Alcazar, Paul Kirshner, and Jack Abel. Now, if you read comics in the 70s, there was this, every now and then you'd get a comic, and it would be inked by, the inking would be credited to the Crusty Bunkers. And what that was Neil Adams had a studio back in the 70s called Continuity Associates. All of these guys were in there or would hang out there. Larry Hama was a member of Continuity Associates, in fact. And so whenever some comic was really behind schedule and they were in a jam, they would call up Neil Adams, and Neil would grab who was ever at the office and probably buy some pizzas, and they just pull some all-nighters, and one artist might draw one panel here, one panel there. They would just attack the comic, round robin style. And if the deadline was in 3 days, they just did get it done. And so a lot of the panels are, different art styles. But Neil Adams was kind of, did quality control. He made sure that it all looked pretty good at the end. And they usually did. The few comics that Crusty Bunkers inked in the 70s all look really good. Way better than your average monthly comic back then. This actually, I looked this up, this is actually the first Crusty Bunkers, even though it's not credited that way. It's awkwardly, they list all the names, so the credits are pretty big. But This was the first time they did this, like did a rush job and all teamed up. So as we go through the comic, we'll see the different styles. I wish I was better at identifying art styles because I could tell you, but I'm not sure. Some of them I kind of know, I can kind of tell, but not all of them. I wish I did. So after he's killed all these bandits, these three characters show up. Blvd the Swordswoman, she's from the Free Swordsman Guild. Rimstriddle the Blader, also of the guild, and Zemba, a magician. And he's from Abamaroha, which is like the African equivalent in this world, Africa. So they're come in peace, but Wulf is kind of half mad from thirst and from his wounds. So he just thinks that they're going to finish the job. There are other bandits off trying to kill him. And Blvd tries to calm him down. And she's just like, hey, man, we got water. We'll give you water. Zemba will heal your wounds. He has healing powers. But he's not hearing it. So he attacks them. And Zemba conks him out with a spell. A sleepy spell. There's some good art right there. I don't know who inked that, but that's nice. So 3 days later, Wulf wakes up in a sick bed, and he's instantly attacked by this weird-looking monster guy. And it's very weird the way he's drawn. I don't know if maybe this is Paul Kirshner, because he could be cartoony, or Jack Abel, who just wasn't very good. But Wulf is drawn very realistically, and this guy is drawn almost like by an 8-year-old. But it kind of makes it cooler and weirder looking. This demon, he's so crudely drawn that it really pops out oh, he's from another dimension. And Wulf hits him with his sword, and he instantly disappears. He's kind of like a ghost demon. So Blvd pops in, says, hey, I'm glad you're better. You've been asleep for 3 days. You're in the city of Ramakesh. We took you here. She almost apologizes for it because the city's seen better days. It's kind of a shithole. So there's no water. All the springs and wells have dried up in the city. People are murdering each other for water. And the way this all started was there was 2 water merchants in the city. This guy, Rasselas, started dabbling in sorcery and sent a demon to kill this guy, his rival, because he wanted to take over the whole water racket for himself. So these demons, though, they were also responsible for drying up all the wells. And also, the spell unleashed all these weird little wraith-like demons throughout the city that harass the people. I love this panel here, this silhouette of this just weird, goofy, cartoony-looking demon. It just looks so creepy because it is I don't know, it's cartoony and weird. So she continues to fill him in about how the Free Swordsman Guild is almost all gone now, because at one point her uncle who ran the guild, yeah, that is very Neil Adams right there. Check that out. That's probably Neil Adams. Her uncle, one of his lieutenants, Jernek the Strangler, garroted him to take over. And then he led all of the swordsmen into the palace of Rasselas, where they were never seen again. So Blvd basically says, hey, the bounty's still on this guy's head. It's a big reward. Everyone hates this guy. Do you want to join us on our mission? And Abamoro explains, I should say that his village in Abamoro is starving. There's a famine, so he wants to take his part of the reward and go back there and take care of his people. God, yeah, some of these panels, just look at the great illustration here. I mean, it fluctuates, as you can imagine. It's all different anchors. So as they're talking, the goons of Rasselas break in, attack them. They fight them off and then escape onto the rooftops. And they waste no time. They head right to Rasselas' castle. They're just going to do it. They're going to do their mission. So here's an example, too. Look at this wolf here. He's so goonish looking. All of a sudden, he looks like way homelier than normal. And I don't know who drew that, but you could definitely tell. Whoever drew Blvd, though, the swordswoman, they seem to be, she always looks great. I think maybe one person drew maybe all the Blvds or most of them. So they get into the palace, and I love this page, this panel. It's obviously MC Escher homage, which a lot of fantasy and comic art, did. But this is so well done. And I suspect this is Paul Kirschner inking this. He was the great cartoonist, still working today. He did a lot of stuff for Heavy Metal and High Times. He was also very good at this like geometrical type stuff. So that's my call on that one. I think Paul Kirschner had something to do with this. I love how it's all green. And then, this next panel, they're all on different planes. Wolf's upside down, Rimstriddle's sideways. But then things calm down a little, I guess, and they see this little troop of zombies coming their way with knives in their hand. It's Jernek the Strangler and the guys who ran in to get the bounty. And another well-drawn panel there. That's some great stuff. So Rimstriddle stays behind to fight them off, and the other three go to confront Rassilus. And they break into his chamber, and when they do, all this water, a flood of water pours out. This one I would guess is Vicente Alcazar, at least the water, because the characters might have been inked by different people. They did that. Sometimes they just split up the panel. But just the way that the water is drawn, the line work, that is like classic great illustration. That's some really good stuff. And that's what Vicente Alcazar was pretty good at. So they walk in. Rassilus is on top of this giant demon statue, Belshazzar. And look at that. There's Rassilus, totally Neil Adams there, bringing the hammer down. So Berith is not a magic user. She's a warrior. So she doesn't really think. She just throws the sword right at Rassilus, kills him, and he bleeds all over the statue. By the way, love that panel of Berith. Zemba's like, oh shit, you fucked up. Because now the blood of Rassilus has awakened Belshazzar. He's mobile now. And he's coming at them like fucking Godzilla. And Zemba realizes the gravity of the situation, realizes he's going to have to make a huge sacrifice here. And basically tells Wulf to run him through. He's going to self-sacrifice himself for the spell, for the power, to give it power. And he summons this giant fire elemental to fight the water demon. Now, before I go on, I just want to go back here and mention, there's another Goonie wolf face there. I think it's the same artist who did that other one. But look at the illustration there, how good that is. That could be Neil Adams. He was good at drawing black people. One of the few artists who knew how. That's a really great panel. But then look, then we go down here and we get another kind of mediocre, someone else did that one. So Berith and Wulf hightail it out of there. They don't want to be there while these two huge guys fight. They run into Rimstriddle. They all escape the palace together just in time because the whole thing explodes from their confrontation. And because of this fight, fire and water colliding, all the steam rises, condenses into clouds, and for the first time in a long time, it rains in the city. This panel is so well drawn, and this one I think I can call. This is Pat Broderick, I think. I loved him as a kid. I collected all of his work. And back then, if you saw his later work, you'd find it hard to believe he could really draw. He was one heck of a drawer. And great panel. I'm pretty sure that's Pat Broderick in that one. But then we go back to here. This looks like Jack Abel. Jack Abel was kind of a dull, mediocre cartoonist who worked for years. So very different styles there. Here's yet another style for Wulf's face. That's someone else, totally different. So Berith says she's going to take Zemba's share of the reward money. She's going to go to Abameroja herself and give it to a starving village. But Wulf, can't join her. He's got to continue his quest. But Rimstriddle decides to join him. And here we see Mordick. He's been keeping tabs on him the whole time, realizing that he's heading this way. I also wanted to mention, because Larry Hama was really into this world and charting Wulf's journey through it. At this beginning here, they're still in the desert of Kesh. So this is just maybe a week after he left Azurabahia in the first issue. And Rama Kesh is on the other side of the desert. So we definitely see like a progression of Wulf's journey. Okay, here's where things get sad. Wulf number 3. Larry Hama's gone. Larry Hama, I don't know why, probably realized that Atlas was a sinking ship and he jumped. But he has nothing to do with this issue, unfortunately. You can already tell by the cover. This art isn't terrible, but it's pretty much just typical mainstream comic art, not nearly as good as the first 2 covers. So here we go with we got the new team, art team. Script by Steve Skeets over a plot and art by Leo Summers. Steve Skeets was one of the better writers, I would say, of the 70s, late 60s. That's not saying much. Most writing was terrible back then in mainstream comics, but he seemed to have added a little quirkiness, a little novelty to his scripts that a lot of writers didn't. So yeah, he was, I don't know, a cut above. But he's just scripting this, and Leo Summers, I don't know much about. I couldn't find much about him, but I remember seeing him in black and white magazines. Maybe he did stuff for Warren, and he was really he could illustrate well, but he was also a little inconsistent and wonky. Definitely wasn't as good as designer as Larry Hama. I don't know, this robot-looking Colossus thing. This just kind of doesn't pop out as a good design. And also, Wulf's face is kind of weird. But then right next to it is a beautifully drawn woman. This is really good. And so it's a little inconsistent, but for the most part, it's pretty interesting and cool art. His art style was very, kind of reminds me of, he's from the Joe Kubert school. But if, Filipino or Spanish artists inked him with that heavy illustration, it's also almost too much sometimes. The art looks very muddy and murky. But it kind of fits for this dark world, you're in a barbarian, savage world. Everything's kind of dirty and grimy. So it kind of works for that. So we see here, Rimstraddle and Wulf are still hanging out. They're on their way for Wulf to meet his destiny and continue his quest. And they realize there's this place called the Iron Citadel. And a few hours away, and they're like, maybe we could stop there, get some food and water for our journey. Yeah, look at this panel of Wulf. He looks really weird. I don't know, he looks like a mongoloid child. But these rat creatures attack. And he draws these guys really repulsively. They just look nasty. They're disease-ridden, filthy creatures. And they fight him off temporarily. And then they run into this rich guy and his daughter. The daughter is actually on her way to the Iron Citadel to marry the head honcho there. She's his fiance. But then the rat creatures come back and on these kangaroo-looking things. And Wulf and Rimstraddle said, yeah, we'll accompany you there. We'll protect you, because they're good guys, So they get to the Iron Citadel. I'm going to kind of gloss over this for the most part, because, this is almost like fan fiction for Wulf. Larry Hama's not here anymore. It's not bad, but still. So they escape the rat creatures, make it to the Iron Citadel. It seems that the head of the Iron Citadel is the stepson of Mordek Malmoriak, Wulf's sworn enemy. Wulf's gonna throttle him, but he says, hold on. I hate him as much as you do. I hate Mordek. Yeah, I'm his son-in-law because he married my mother just so he could take all of the steel foundries that she owned. But, I flipped things around. The slaves that worked here, I freed them and let them, they still work for me because I built this paradise under the city, and they barely work. It's mostly automated. Every now and then they pretend to be slaves in case Mordek, spies in. But that's what it turns out happens. Mordek's been spying the whole time. This little thing plinks off, and it's one of Mordek's telescreens. He's been keen to this guy's scheme the whole time. And basically says, yeah, those slaves, they've been working for me the whole time, and now they're all attacking our heroes. It seemed kind of crazy to me, this guy freed these slaves and they're still working for Mordek instead of aligning with this guy, but maybe they're just terrified of him. They escape in this hot air balloon, and the head honcho guy, he set explosives, blows up the whole Iron Citadel. And so here we see Mordek's furious with Gerba, slaps him. He's like, why didn't you tell me about that hot air balloon and the explosives? He's like, I didn't know, master. I'm sorry. Grovel, grovel. I just love the way he's drawn there. It kind of makes me laugh. He's such a little toady. So, yeah, they escape. Wulf says, hey, could you lower the balloon a little so I can jump out? I got to continue my quest. Rimstraddle stays with them. He's going to be their, bodyguard on their journey. Look at this panel here, though. That is so Joe Kubert. That could be from the Viking Prince. I love that shit. So that's the end of issue 3. But there's something very important here, at least to me as a child. I loved in fantasy books and in comic books where they'd show you a map of the world. I love these. I even traced this as a little kid on a tracing paper for some reason. And I would just stare at it, I guess, and imagine what adventures could happen in this world. But we can really see that Larry Hama really thought this shit through. Like, he made a whole world. A lot of these places are very evocative. Like, I want to see Wulf in these places and what adventures he'd get into. But we even see the progress that he's made, throughout the comic. He was following this map. So here's Azerbaijan, the Middle East analog, on the edge of the desert of Kesh, where he fought those 9 bandits. And then Barith and friends find him, take him to Ramakesh, which is at the other end of the desert. And then there's Bairnholm, where Wulf was trying to get back to. And Castle Silverkeep, which is, where his father ruled from. And there's Drakenroost, where Mordek Malmoriak, the asshole, lives, near the Dead Heath. But we also see, on the way, we see the Dragon's Flight that we saw in issue number 1, the Spires of the Screaming Demons, Cities of the Lizard Kings, and the Realm of the Air Pirates. So I don't know if Bobby London and Sherry Flanagan live there, but they changed the name from Sky Pirates to Air Pirates for some reason. And here we see Abamaroha, where Zemba was from, on the edge of a jungle. That's kind of like Africa. This seems to be like Asia. All the names of these cities, Quan and Sing and Quanjun, they seem Asian. Temple of the Fighting Gods, Shrine of the Lost Demon, Fortress of the Sea Lords. I want to see Wulf getting adventures everywhere here. The Sea of Pleth, even though it has a silly name. The Kingdom of the Ice Mountains. So yeah, I just love that shit. And as a kid, I really love that shit. So now things are about to get really bad here, guys. Number 4. This is just so sad what happens to Wulf. So here's the cover art and inside art is by Jim Craig. He was a Canadian cartoonist, did a lot of fanzine work in the 70s. Went on to draw Master of Kung Fu for Marvel after Paul Gulacy left. And even if you were a great artist, that would be a tough follow-up. But he wasn't very good at all in the first place. So he didn't last long. And they took him off after, a few issues. So this one I'm definitely going to gloss over. Just kind of show you how bad things get here with the art. Look at that. All of a sudden, Wulf's hair is like 2 times its normal length. It's just really bad art. Editor Larry Lieber. Script Mike Friedrich, who went on to make Star Reach magazine. Actually, he might have even started it at this time. Pencils Jim Craig. Inks the Atlas Bullpen. So this is almost going to be like a reverse Krusty Bunkers, a shittier Krusty Bunkers, where apparently this issue was late and they needed to get it to the press quick. There's a deadline. And so they just got random guys to just ink various panels. And lettering by Shelley Lefferman, who I never heard of her again. So just, typical barbarian hijinks, fighting. I don't care. It's so bad, the art. And but some are worse than others. So some guys in the Atlas Bullpen are not as bad. Like, this isn't the worst compared to like some of these panels. But yeah, apparently there's this, like, in this Darkling Wood, which is in Bairnholm. So Wulf is very close to his finishing his quest. There's this blood-sucking monster creature. And it morphs back into this guy, this human. And then here we have a panel. Actually, I don't know if you can see this. I hope you can see this nicely. It's or well, but it's a very cartoony version of Wulf. Looks very different than all the other artists in this issue. If the whole issue was drawn like this, I'd be pretty happy with it. I like this style. It's pretty good, but that's it for one panel. Pretty soon you're back to the shitty drawn Wulf, you know. So Wulf comes upon this guy, the human who turns into a blood demon. And it turns out he knows him. He was the royal toy maker of Wulfgar, which seems like a silly title. Not much prestige there. Yeah, lots of just bad anatomy going on. That's slightly better, I guess. But then that's not. And yeah, some more shenanigans go on, some fighting. But this whole time, even though this guy's in human form, he's like, oh, as soon as Wulf falls asleep, I'm going to suck his blood. I hunger for blood. He does. Wulf finally goes to sleep. He attacks him. And Wulf, because he's Wulf the Barbarian, gets the upper hand and stabs him. So here's an interesting panel. Look at that. That looks like Wally Wood to me. And, you know, he did comics for Atlas. So maybe he was at the bullpen that day picking up his paycheck. And they grabbed him and said, draw this panel. It's pretty good. But then look at this right here. This is so bad. This is the toy maker. You can barely tell. He looks like Chaka from the Land of the Lost or something. Or I don't know. Just kind of hilarious how bad that drawing is of that guy's face. So then, yeah, let's just get rid of this shit. So he dies. He tells him that Mordek put that spell on him, turned him into the monster. So Wulf's got one more reason to hate Mordek Malmoric. And he screams into the night sky, you'll be revenged, and I'm coming to get you, Mordek. And we see next issue, Return to Castle Silverkeep. But we never get to see that. It never happens, because this is the last issue, unfortunately, of Wulf the Barbarian. So sad. It's like they say, not with a bang, but a whimper. Such a great character and concept could be reduced to that in a few issues. So there you go, Wulf the Barbarian, number 1 through 4. I hope you can find these issues. They're usually very cheap. They actually used to be quarter bin fodder for decades. I'd find these in quarter bins. And yeah, hope you liked it. And we're definitely going to be doing more Atlas Comics in the future. I'd love... Atlas Comics is a fascinating little comic company. Once again, you got to track this shit down. John B. Cook's comic book artist number 16. If you want to get the down low on comic book artist. Down low? The 411? God, I'm an old man. I don't even know these terms anymore. Okay, I'll see you next time. Have a good day.